Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Pasquale, I did better, Mazzuca. And he is absolutely amazing in terms of what he's done. So let me give you some of his background, because I think it's important always to put a person's thoughts into the context of their experience. He's an executive leadership coach and consultant. He has been partner with Heidrick and Struggles in their leadership consulting practice. He co-founded and grew Hamilton Davenport Partners, a leadership consulting boutique. He has human resource experience. He's directed human resources. He has worked with A.T. Kearney Management Consultants. He's an associate professor at Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina. I'm sorry for that mispronunciation there for those of you who are North Carolina people. He holds a lot of different degrees. He has worked with companies all over the world. He has worked with companies in the UK. That's where he's located at the moment. And he has worked in Belgium, in Italy, in France, Bulgaria. So here are some of the companies: Alstom Grid, Cone International, BAT, Mobitel Bulgaria, Stanley and Decker, Johnson & Johnson, Eurocontrol, Management Center Europe, and the list goes on. So with that, I just want you to know we've got an expert here. And before we get really started with our discussion, anything I left out that is really important for our audience to know about you?
Thank you so much, Lois, for inviting me. I really do appreciate that. And I'm really excited to be here. You've covered a lot of background there, and that's just great. Just one story I'd like to share with you as an introduction. Many years ago, when I was working in the corporate world, I attended quite a few board meetings and executive level meetings. And I remember at all these meetings, we used to have introductions, and everybody kind of used to introduce themselves, like I'm, managing director of this and managing director of that. And when it came time to the CEO that was there in the company, he always introduced himself as the CTO, and it's not what you think it is. And when you asked him, well, what does CTO mean? Because he was the CEO, he said, no, I'm CTO. And he said, I'm the Chief Trouble Officer. So I'm always causing trouble by representing a different way of thinking, a different mindset, shaking the tree a little bit. And that's kind of been a little bit my philosophy over the years, is to kind of get people in coaching sessions that I have to hold back and, hey, think about things in a little bit more detail and ask those probing questions and get people to think about things perhaps in a different way. So anyway, that was just a little bit of something to add on to the introduction.
It's interesting because Chief Trouble Officer in many ways is what the companies are experiencing right now, isn't it? And you can look at that as a positive, and it also has that negative little twist to it. But one of the things that we talked about before we started the podcast, Pasquale, is that the world that we've begun to create is one that nobody seems to be happy living in or working in. So let's talk a little bit about that, what you've observed with that. And then let's talk a little bit about what does that mean for CEOs and leaders?
Yes, great. And we have actually created this world that nobody wants. And the evidence of that is, for instance, if you look at employee engagement, studies show that the employee engagement is decreasing and has decreased. And so almost 2/3 of people on the job, people working today, are disengaged from the activities that they're doing. And so there is in a lot of organizations today, there is a detachment that's occurring of people and their management and their leaders, in fact. And I did a little exercise recently where I typed into Google in the search engine, my manager is, and Google completed it. And the first answer that Google popped up, which was, I guess, the one that was the most searched after, is my manager is bullying me.
Wow.
Not very, very, very good to hear that. And then the list goes on. My manager is harassing me. My manager is bullying me, and so on and so on. And so there's a big disconnect that is occurring today in organizations. And this is all around a culture that we've created over the years. And this culture is one where there's a focus on results, a laser sharp focus on results, which of course you need to, because companies are there to make a profit. However, that's the trade-off of that is that there's less focus being paid on the individual, the person that's doing the work, the human being at the end of the day. And it's that human being that needs a great deal more of attention than has been given in the past. And companies are slowly beginning to wake up to this and creating a kind of a culture that's more focused on well-being, more focused on increasing employee engagement in organizations today. It's not there yet. The first step is that people are recognizing it, and they're recognizing the importance of what's known as human capital
Mhm.
as opposed to financial capital, right? And so that'll change more and more in the future as people begin to realize that the biggest differentiating factor in companies today, the ones that are successful and the ones that are not successful, is how the leaders can manage the human capital, lead the human capital in the organization. And so there's a lot of work that's being done in that area, still not there yet. And I've been observing this with a lot of interactions that I've had with my clients and some organizations. Just to give you an example, I work with a technology startup, and the company has grown from 3 people, its founders, to where there are over 50 people today. And they're bringing a new product into the marketplace, which is really revolutionary. And they're pushing the boundaries of what that technology is going to be able to do. At the same time, that technology has very demanding timelines, and people are working crazy hours, and it's really incredible the amount of effort that people are putting in. And leadership has recognized that and putting in a lot of effort in terms of organizing employee focus groups, organizing wellness moments in the company. So, doing different things that are going to help the human capital to be more engaged, but also more productive.
So one of the part of that, what you're talking about that I'm also hearing is employees saying, "Boy, I sold my soul to the company, the last company I was with. I'm never doing that again," because they really, in the end, they didn't care. And I'm always worry about that because you go to the next position and you're working at with a caution, with a yellow light around you so that you know when to exit, you know when to say, this is my limit, right? You've pushed me too far. And so I want to talk a little bit about leaders. How do leaders know and create what needs to be put in place? Because it's a new kind of leadership that we're going to be needing.
Exactly, exactly. And that's a great point that you've made there, Lois. And today, what's going on in leadership is that people are stepping back and taking stock. I've been following very closely BP, British Petroleum, and British Petroleum have made a public statement that they're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. 2030, that's 10 years' time. And so for a big company, this is a reinvention of their DNA because BP, British Petroleum, is a company that is in the oil and gas business, right? They supply oil and gas, upstream, downstream, and all the different products that go around that. And so they've made a commitment to be carbon neutral. Why have they done that? Because the new CEO that's come on board, who's somebody that's been in the company for 30 or so years, spent their career in the company, has seen the power of creating this new world that is different than the world that we had before. And so now that that strategy is in place, the company has been organized to create a culture around that and to drive that all the way down through all the different layers in the organization. And so this is really something that sets the example from the top, sets the tone from the top. So the first thing that leaders need to do is to be the role model.
Hmm.
I think it was Gandhi that said, be the change you want to see in the world. And so this is exactly it. So you have to demonstrate what you want to see as change. So that's the first thing. So being able to be the role model and walk the talk. And the second thing is to listen, it's and not lose connection with all the different layers of an organization. And again, this example of BP, the CEO, he spends a lot of time actually on LinkedIn, believe it or not, posting. And it's really funny because even when people that have got a job with BP, even an entry level job, and they've posted it on LinkedIn saying, hey, I've been I'm happy to join BP. He picks that up and he says, oh, welcome
Oh,
to the
wow.
company. Can you imagine the CEO of 100,000 plus organization that's a global company sending you that message? Can you imagine what that does to you? So I think the listening part is extreme. And the third thing that is incredibly important is empathy and compassion, right? So being able to see the world from the other person's perspective, the other person's shoes. And a lot of the time we get stuck in our own activities, and as leaders we want to charge forward and do a great job, and that's fantastic. At the same time, we need to relate to the other people in the company, and the empathy part is the one that is very important.
So part of what you're saying is those are skills, largely communication skills, listening, empathy, compassion, acknowledging somebody for their for just being present in the company, liking the company. Those are communication skills. They take time. And do you think that we've grown leaders now with the skills that they need to be able to fill that role? Or are we needing to look at our training programs and our onboarding of our executives in a different way so they can really implement those three aspects?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. And you're absolutely right. So if you look at what's highly demanded in terms of skills by executives these days, influencing without authority comes really high up on that list. So influencing without authority is really very important if you want to progress as a leader. We're not born with influencing skills, right? Or we don't acquire magically influencing skills. And so there's a way to help us identify where we are with our own influencing, and use different techniques to help us build our influencing repertoire and portfolio. So influencing is important. And we mentioned earlier on listening, active listening. That's also a skill that, with practice, you become obviously more and more proficient in doing that.
So, how do we need to prepare our leaders differently? Is it our graduate school programs? Is it the role of the company to do the training? Who will provide this kind of training, do you think?
That's a good question. Ultimately, the capabilities that people need to progress and make a career, um, those are capabilities that can be learned over time, can be mastered. And so, first of all, it's the individual's responsibility
Yes.
to, first of all, understand where they are in terms of their own strengths and liabilities. I mean, we all have assets and we all have liabilities. So they need to understand from their perspective what are their assets and liabilities. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, what are the basic building blocks that you need to be able to progress? You mentioned communication, that's one of them. Influencing, that's another one. Um, Being able to handle adversity, for instance, that's also another. And so there are a number of building blocks that you can accumulate and put into practice. And it's through experience that you gain the insights to be able to know whether this works or that works, or how this works and how this doesn't work. And leadership has always been situational, it's always been contextual, right? Uh, and it's a question of putting the skills that you have into the contextual elements that will give you the best results.
So, do you think that our experience with COVID is going to accelerate this change, the need to adapt, to create an environment where people will be more happy and wanting to come to work?
Somebody was telling me the other day that COVID has caused 10 years worth of change in 90 days. When you see, it's a massive amount of change, massive. We're working differently, right? So people that have been asked to work from home, who traditionally have been working from the office, they've been having to get used to a number of different things. First thing is the commute. They've gained time. So people have gained time not spending going into commute. That's the first. Second thing is they've had the chance to spend more time with their families, right? Because they're in the home environment, working out of the home office. And the third thing is it's created this need for thinking about how can I become more effective in interacting with others when now I can't do it over a coffee machine. I can't go over to somebody's desk. And if I've got an idea, I could quickly go over to their desk and share it with them. Can't do that anymore. I have to be able to interact and relate to people differently. And as a leader, managing a virtual team takes a different set of skills or a complementary set of skills than managing people directly when you're next to them or when they have their office further down from you. So that's a whole way of working that we didn't think about really before. And now some companies, for instance, like Google, are asking people to work from home full time. I mean, they're just going to get people to work, not come into the office and just. So that means that as leaders, as managers, as contributors, as individuals, we have to get into this mindset of working differently and of being prepared to interact in a different way.
You know, I was speaking with the executive vice president for HubSpot, Christopher O'Donnell. And one of the comments that he made is that one of the challenges right now with our virtual or hybrid office system is that those little conversations you had in the hallway where you made an assessment about somebody, asked a question, and it entered your mind in terms of a promotion or movement in terms of project development or leading a project. But you don't have those conversations anymore. So his observation was, in a sense, it's maybe made the ground more neutral in terms of gender and race because email is the method of communication. So he saw some real positives in it. But I'm also hearing, especially from women who are working virtually, an exhaustion because they're also having to manage school often, and then they've got the children around more often, and they don't have that ability to get out and connect with other. They're more contained and limited to their own home environment. So what are you finding in that area?
You're absolutely right. Just recently, I've got a great example of that. Just recently, I was um, facilitating an executive leadership team meeting. And it was the first time this team had come together since February of this year, come together physically since February. I mean, they'd had a lot of Zoom calls and virtual calls, whatever, and their business was progressing. Now we spent a day together, done in all kinds of sanitary conditions with social distancing and hand sanitizers and whatever. So that was done according to the way we should have done it. And it was really incredible because the CEO came to me at the end of the session saying that he was absolutely amazed at how much progress the team had made compared to previous occasions where they'd had meetings virtually. How much progress was made in this session, in one 8-hour session we spent very intensively together. We got at least 3 months work done,
Wow.
advanced with the team. And so that was something that was very, very satisfactory. Obviously, because of the situation with COVID right now, you can't do that on a regular basis. But from time to time, balancing the virtual with the face to face is a very productive way of doing it. If you have balance it all on one side, only the virtual, as you rightly say, you miss those interactions, which advance and make uh, projects and increase the productivity of project. And at the same time, if you do it all face to face, then people take too much time out of their activities for it to be
Yeah.
productive. So finding the balance between the two is really key.
It is such a tough balance. And I think initially, right at the outset of COVID, the thing I used to see and hear the most was, oh, thank goodness we don't have all those meetings anymore. So there was that relief initially. Now people are beginning to miss that interrelationship. So here's another thing that I think is happening that I think I'm beginning to see a shift, although people, I don't know how much conversation it is getting. And that is, I'm hearing HR directors saying, if we're working in a hybrid setting, I'm no longer limited geographically. I don't have to move somebody to the corporate headquarters. I can literally hire the best talent from anywhere in the world. So I think we may begin to see some shifting in terms of how we look at our the people who we have within our company. We may be looking past geographic boundaries because we're no longer limited by that. Your thoughts on that? Are you seeing that at all?
Absolutely, yes. And we talk more and more about companies building a talent portfolio of people that they can bring in to execute parts of their business project, whatever it is. And that portfolio of talent, especially in the digital world, can be anywhere, can be in India, can be in China, can be in the US, can be in South America, can be anywhere. And so that geographic barrier, as you rightly say, is now no longer a consideration when you look at the virtual world. Having said that, I come back to what we said earlier on. You still need the face to face connection from time to time, the real world connection. I always say you can't email a handshake. That's why you always need that face to face part in combination with.
Yeah, having spent a lot of time in Japan, it's being able to read the person's heart space is so critical and hard to do that over Zoom.
Exactly, exactly.
So, as we bring this to a close, thoughts that we've missed, things that we should have talked more fully, what have we left out?
So we spoke a lot about the leadership that we need to change today. The leadership paradigm has to shift because a lot of people are unhappy with the world that we've created. And this leadership paradigm shift starts with you, starts with me, starts with the individual.
Right.
And that's really where the mindset needs to adapt to the future world that we want to create, the future environment that we want to be part of. And we really need to actively engage and have a voice in what we want that world to look like. Just like the example that I mentioned with the CEO of BP that's taken on this incredible challenge and that's building a culture around. Obviously they're a, they're an in-profit for-profit business. You need to show results to your shareholders. However, at the same time, they're building in a lot of compassion in what they do
Right.
and a lot of diversity in thought, a lot of diversity in input, a lot of diversity in voice that they bring. One example that I can share with you, I've been working many years with different leadership teams around the globe. And time again, one of the things that I learned about the success of leadership teams is that most leadership teams that are highly successful are always very diverse teams in terms of gender, culture, ethnicity. These teams compared to teams that are all white, all one one gender, or all one particular background, they have more success in terms of results than the other teams. And I've actually seen this for myself firsthand. And so it actually pays to have a very diverse and inclusive organization and leadership that you're going to be putting in place for the future.
Before we leave, I think you have a very interesting perspective on your consulting and how you do consulting. And for those of you who are listening, we will have information in the show notes about how you can connect with Pasquale, so that you
You're
can,
getting there.
yeah, I'll get there before we're finished. So you can,
Congratulations. Yeah.
so you can connect with him. But one of the things that you talked about was bringing in a network of consultants of talent for specific purposes. because how we do work within organizations have changed, but how we do work as consultants is beginning to shift. So speak a little bit about that.
Sure, exactly. And as I mentioned to you earlier on, I've had first-hand experience of that, where depending on a client need, and it always starts from a client need. So the focus is on the client. So if a project is of a certain size where obviously alone in what I do, I can bring in a network of experts to work on a particular project. And I know the expertise, I know the level and quality of delivery of people in the network. And I can bring that network to help the client on a particular project. And so I'm also part of different expertise networks. And in that way, we share a lot of experience and best practice that is currently going to be useful for the client and helping the client out in a particular project that they're working on.
I love that idea, an expertise network. So creating one and having one that you can utilize as you need it. So it's on an as needed basis, which is beautiful, isn't it?
Exactly.
Pasquale, thank you so much for your time today, for your thoughts on leadership and how we really need to reshape our world. I really appreciate your thoughts and comments. And for those of you who are listening to us today on Building My Legacy podcast, thank you. And be sure to look at the show notes for information.
Thank you for having me, Lois. It's been my pleasure, and I look forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you for watching my video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell button above. Leave comments. We'd love to hear what you think. And visit our other social media links as well. Thanks much.